Hello.
Our story begins en route from Coruscant to Naboo, a few weeks before the beginning of the Clone Wars. Padme Amidala was the senator of Naboo, and she was returning to her homeworld to discuss the movement of the Military Creation Act within the Galactic Senate. She sat inside of her starship with a disheartened expression on her face. Captain Typho happened to be walking through the vessel and saw her looking this way, so he stopped and sat down across from her, asking what was bothering her. She looked up and told him that throughout her entire life, she was taught to believe in the Republic and the democracy it upheld, but it was, in her opinion, starting to feel like it wasn't worth it. He asked her if she was just unmotivated because of the decisions made by the Senate in the past few sessions. She nodded her head, but stood up and grabbed a holopad and expressed that it was more than just that. She had great friends from across the galaxy that were pulling away from the Republic, some of them even mentors, like Mina Bontiri. Padme set down the holopad and opened it up, and scrolled through, looking at dire circumstances across the galaxy, as she told him that the Republic was meant to be everyone's government, and yet it wasn't. It was supposed to be the public servants representing their respective planets and the people of their systems. But she sighed, saying that it no longer felt like it was that system. At 24, the galaxy was supposed to feel free and enticing, and yet it was troublesome everywhere. As a public servant herself, she knew that life wouldn't be filled with personal freedoms as a young adult, but she feared for others like her that grew up and realized the life they were promised no longer existed. She told Typho that she didn't really want to suggest it, but she was considering the idea of asking the Queen if they should align themselves with the Separatist movement. He hesitated, preparing for a rebuttal, but she spoke up, telling him that it did make sense, reasonably. As Queen, 10 years ago, she was forced to wait for the Senate to gather themselves together so they could save their people. Now the Senate was squandering their time trying to force the creation of a military for a war no one needed, but she had to admit, the prospect of war was terrifying. She agreed that the Separatists seemed to be encouraging it, but realistically, the Republic would encourage that war. Typho asked why she thought that, and Padme got up, walking over to the side of the room. She took a deep breath and turned back, crossing her arms, as if she were embracing herself. She told him that the Republic was based in corruption. War would be profitable for the many corporations that ran the government. In her mind, Palpatine had lied about his promises 10 years before. Typho suggested that she take matters to Palpatine's desk and see if he could do anything, and she shook her head, telling him that she had. Palpatine always left false promises. It seemed that the office of Chancellor took his morals and he lost himself. He now favored those same bureaucrats he spoke so bad about during the blockade over Naboo. Padme told Typho that the more she spoke or thought about it, the sicker she got. They were betrayed by one of their own. That perhaps stung more than believing the Republic would save them all those years ago. Typho tried thinking of any other ideas that could help, but she expressed her belief in this decision. By the time they got to Naboo, Padme had plenty of time to write up a one-week plan for how they could abandon the Republic and force Palpatine to look foolish. When she arrived in the throne room, she spoke extensively with the Queen about her plan. The Queen was truthfully on edge by the entire conversation. She didn't like the idea of leaving the Republic, but Padme made a lot of good points about the need to leave. The Queen told Padme that the pull away from the Republic would make Palpatine look fragile in the Senate, but it could also elicit negative reactions from the population. They were attacked by the Trade Federation, and the people wouldn't want to align themselves with a system of government that Dooku seemed to be bringing together. Though there was a solid counterpoint, which was the fact that the Republic allowed representatives from the Trade Federation into their body already. The Queen expressed that she would consult her advisors. While she did that, she wanted Padme to speak to the Chancellor. Padme didn't really want to, but the Queen asked that she get his opinions on this removal. Padme was reluctant. It wasn't like her to avoid following a mission or an order, but she didn't want Palpatine to be in on this. Padme decided to layer it into a conversation, but not make it the focal point. Her talk with the Chancellor was more like a follow-up to the one that she had at the end of her time on Coruscant. When she spoke to him, she asked him about the Military Creation Act, and he told her some blunt lie, but framed it in a hopeful demeanor, hoping that the Separatists wouldn't incite a war. He told her that he looked forward to her safe return to Coruscant, confirming that she planned on returning in exactly 3 weeks. The call ended after Padme alluded to the idea of Naboo leaving the Republic, which Palpatine noted but didn't think much of. He essentially suggested that Naboo would follow him no matter what he did. Padme returned to the Queen and exaggerated what Palpatine said, suggesting that he had no fears about them leaving him, insinuating that he led Naboo and that they would follow him blindly. The Queen didn't carry an ego, but as the leader of the planet, she believed in what Padme told her. By the end of the night, they were in contact with representatives from the Confederacy movement, and by the end of the week, they visited the planet and certified Naboo as one of the thousands of star systems seceding from the Republic. Padme was removed from the Republic Senate and placed inside the Separatist one. Dooku was very surprised by this, because after he got his government set up on Raxus, he delegated his senators and representatives to recruit other systems, so he wasn't really involved with the process unless the system was afraid of joining. When the news broke that the Queen of Naboo sided with the Separatist movement, the galaxy was in shock. The truth is, the Queen, the Naboo, and the Gungans were all in agreement with this. Not everything was perfect, but the people understood why the decision was made. Naboo didn't want to contribute to the war, and they, while in disagreement with both forms of government, knew that the Confederacy felt like the lesser of two evils. Palpatine was completely blindsided by this move, and Dooku was too. It was tragic for Dooku, because he was tortured for his negligence, but he wasn't wrong to assume that the Naboo would never betray the Republic. They were deeply intertwined with the system, and after the blockade, it seemed like the people of Naboo were hopeful that the Naboo-born Chancellor would represent them properly. It seemed that, like most Republic politicians, he sold his soul for credits from the bureaucrats and forgot all about them. The people of Naboo were a little worried, but the Queen displayed a public message to her people, informing them of her decision and why she felt the need to do it. There were a lot more inner workings to this secession from the Republic, but it was a relatively quick transition. Padme had to get used to her new peers and how she would operate within this new system, though she very quickly found that it was very similar. The biggest difference was the motivation from the politicians themselves. They seemed a lot more people-focused, and it reminded her of why she joined the Senate to begin with. As a public servant, she wanted to serve her people, and now she couldn't. The CIS elicited her more power to have a voice not overshadowed for a lust of war. As Padme realized it was the Republic who was warmongering, she didn't really see much of a call to action that was present within the Senate chambers on Coruscant. The young senator got acquainted with her new allies and spoke to them about her experiences with the Senate of the Republic. Her motivations fell in line with that of the other senators of the CIS. She wanted to help her constituents, and she now felt more widespread support for doing so. With the Republic, there was Bail and Mon and maybe a couple others spread throughout, but most of them were corrupt. Inside the executive building of Coruscant, Palpatine watched his power buckle from under him. Initially, Padme was like a thorn in the side. She was irritating and frustrating because she constantly blocked the Military Creation Act. He was planning to have her assassinated when she returned to Coruscant, which is why he specifically asked her about her return. He planned on telling Dooku so Dooku could tell Jango, who could tell Zam, who could send a droid that would deposit poisonous bugs to kill her. Seemed like a flawless plan, but that was kind of undone now. Without Padme blocking the Military Creation Act, he could go forward with relative ease. To Padme's allies, this was like a backstab. The weight of the bill sat on her desk and she abandoned it. Her allies were frustrated with her, and her opponents were happy, but this scenario drastically affected Palpatine's office. He went from strong leader of a planet that survived a terrible blockade 10 years ago, to a fragile leader not far from the path that beset Valorum. Poetically, it was very similar. Palpatine and Valorum were at the peak of their power, and there was an external movement that threatened said power. The public now saw that Palpatine was fragile. If his homeworld could pull away from the Republic without him being able to stop them, then could he legitimately hold the Republic together? He couldn't even maintain control over his home world. The Dark Lord needed to reset everything. His plans were foiled by a simple move, which was very aggravating. He told Dooku to keep a close eye on her, while he prepared to move the Republic into a position of war. He'd find an alternative means to getting the clone army to Coruscant, so that they could be ready for the coming war. In the meantime, he needed to appear strong. He told Dooku to motion the Trade Federation blockade towards a mid-rim world. It would show the Republic that he wouldn't buckle like Valorum did 10 years before. War inevitably came in the weeks following Naboo joining the CIS. It wasn't directly related to the event, but more so how Palpatine reacted to the secession. The Trade Federation blockade put the Chancellor into the spotlight, especially following the embarrassing loss of Naboo. But his reaction was strong. He was able to make the Jedi appear responsible for the discovery of the clone army. It was a long and difficult process, but it was something he planned for as it was, being that in the alternative scenario, Padme was meant to die under Jedi supervision. Regardless, when the clones and their fleets arrived, there was a stiff standoff, before eventually resulting in a skirmish, one in which an inferior Republic force pushed away the Separatists. In her new Senate, Padme and her allies, specifically Mina Bontiri, worked dedicatedly to try and put the tension to rest, but as per Palpatine and Dooku's plans, each side saw the other as the aggressor. Padme was not in agreement with the Trade Federation blockade, but the difference is, this blockade wasn't a total blockade like the one over Naboo. Instead, this one more so was used as a protective barrier around the planet that was drumming up threats of war against the Separatists. So as the CIS government saw it, the Trade Federation was protecting their best interests. The Republic saw it as a repeat of the blockade of Naboo. When the Republic came to liberate the planet, the Separatists saw it as an attack. The duality of the reactions gave the Sith a perfect opportunity to force the galaxy into war. The gradual process that followed was the beginning of the Clone Wars. On the Republic side, there was the Jedi, those who weren't directly involved in the beginning of the war, but ironically were viewed as the architects of it. Due to the way everything transpired, it appeared as if the Jedi created the clone army, waited for 10 years, allowed Dooku to gain power, and then used his former Jedi status to force the galaxy into war. This rapidly forced the Jedi to lose their reputation. They went from peacekeepers to potential warmongers overnight. And while they didn't have anything to do with the blockade or the skirmish that followed, it was the public information of 1, their former Jedi Master, Dooku, being the one to set up the blockade and supporting it, and 2, Palpatine saying that the Jedi were able to reveal and uncover their own military, giving it to the Republic. While the Jedi were facing scrutiny from the galaxy, one of their members, Jedi Padawan Anakin Skywalker, was struggling with his own issues. He'd been having nightmares about his mother, but due to the circumstances in the galaxy getting so heated, he wasn't permitted to go to Tatooine. So one night, after weeks of terrible night terrors, he no longer had them. It helped ease his heart, even though the end of these dreams meant that his mother was gone. Though aside from the unknown death of Shmi Skywalker, Anakin was worried about something else. The girl he'd been dreaming about for the past 10 years was now a Separatist sympathizer. Unlike Obi-Wan, Anakin didn't get involved in politics, so the entire arena was just gobbledygook to him. He truthfully carried a lot of Palpatine's ideals, but that's because Palpatine told him his plans and ideas, which Skywalker rapidly digested. Obi-Wan never talked politics with his apprentice, because he knew Anakin didn't care. If he had, he may have been able to call Palpatine out on his autocratic behaviors. Regardless, Anakin wasn't able to understand why Padme would join the Separatists, or why Naboo would secede. From his position, it felt like the woman he loved most in the galaxy created this galactic divide, because it did seem that the Naboo leaving the Republic directly led to the beginning of this division. Though something about Anakin made him wonder if she was making the right decision for joining the CIS. Maybe she was. She knew her people, but that couldn't be right. Palpatine had to be right in his mindset regarding the Republic. Anakin just wished that he could get the opportunity to talk to her about these developments. Without becoming a knight, Anakin continued serving with Obi-Wan as the Clone Wars kicked off to a terrifying start. The war went similarly, both sides vying for more support from the neutral systems and unaligned planets in the galaxy. Dooku and Asajj did a lot of this, because she was the only person he trusted to tell him about the uncanny developments of the galaxy. The war was a grudge match, but the CIS was able to win early victories. This came in part to their oversized military, but also because 2 of the best fighters on the side of the Republic were fighting as General Kenobi and Commander Skywalker within the same unit of clones. Padme heard about Commander Skywalker and General Kenobi, and she felt so terrible for them. She never wanted them to get hurt, and she hoped that the battle droids would show them kindness. And despite how she disagreed with the Republic and believed that they started the war, she was hopeful that they could amicably bring the war to a close. There was no reason for this bloodshed, especially after the CIS Senate learned that the clones were basically child soldiers. It aided their war propaganda, and it did get other planets to join the war on their behalf. Though something Padme became enamored with was the idea of getting Satine to temporarily align with the CIS so that they could end the war. They were close friends, but the issue is, despite how much Satine wanted to end the war, she didn't want to be working in alignment with the CIS. Not because she didn't believe they could end the war, but because Satine, like Padme, understood Palpatine's power. He could see this temporary alliance to end the war as Mandalore trying to join the CIS, and Satine would not have bloodshed on her planet again. Satine told Padme that if she and her allies could design a bill or peace treaty, she would motion it forward from the Neutral Systems Coalition, of course only if it got universal support from her allied systems. About 3 to 4 months into the war, there was trouble for the Chancellor of the Republic. The war was going terribly for the clone army. The Jedi weren't doing much better, and after a terrible loss at Ryloth, before Kenobi, Skywalker, and Windu led a successful counter, the senator from the planet returned to Coruscant with vengeance. Had Palpatine not lost Naboo, this motion would never come forward, but like how Padme did with Valorum, Cham Syndulla and Free-Ta set forward a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Palpatine's leadership. He appeared weak, and the rest of the galaxy was suffering for it. The Separatist war effort on the planet became visible, which was the starvation of their people. Captain Tuck, before his unfortunate death at the hands of Anakin Skywalker during a war crime, had gone too far in Ryloth. The news, of course, from Ryloth pissed off the people of the Republic, but those who served with Padme and Mina inside the Separatist government were unnerved by it. Inside the Senate building on Coruscant, the bureaucrats panicked. Their largest moneymaker was going to get voted out. The biggest issue with this vote of no confidence was the fact that the Republic genuinely couldn't afford to switch leaders during the middle of the war, but at the same time, they were losing pretty terribly at the moment. The call for the removal of Palpatine was a difficult one to respond to, and he secured his power with certainty. However, there was another problem for him. He may have beat back Free-Ta and Cham Syndulla, but there were other systems in the galaxy facing the scourge of the Separatist military, and they came back to pull another vote of no confidence. The first attempt from the Twi'leks was met with stiff resistance. However, the second vote against Palpatine forced him from office, while ushering in a new senator. He was a more moderate figure, the senator from Umbara named Midishi. He was a war-loving senator, and as the Republic shriveled away from victory, they decided that more war and more power was necessary. Newly elected Chancellor Dishi quickly mobilized a Republic militia and stripped power from the Jedi Order. This instantaneously made them irrelevant in the power rankings of the military. It was decided that they could serve, but they would not receive their medals for it. This was a way to prove what the Jedi were. If they continued serving, then their intentions were true, but if they ran from the war without power, then it only showed who they really were, a shell of an order dedicated to peace. The Jedi lost the military rankings, but they did not leave the war effort. They stayed on the front lines with their soldiers. While one would assume Palpatine would be outraged by this loss of power, he wasn't. This only meant he could focus on winning the war. Palpatine went from full-time Chancellor and part-time Sith Lord to full-time Puppet Master and full-time Sith Lord. He didn't have to worry about running the galaxy and maintaining the political presence of the Republic. Perhaps this was the greatest gift he could have been given. The galaxy was at war, and with a warmongering leader, with the Republic and Dooku under his thumb, he could control the war effort with simply Dooku. Now for Palpatine, he would focus on turning young Skywalker to the dark side. He knew that Anakin would be outraged by these changes, seeing the Republic and the Jedi as corrupt entities. While Anakin didn't have issues with the Jedi, because they had nothing to do with Palpatine losing power, Anakin no longer wanted to serve a corrupt government. He understood what Padme saw before the war began, and it gave him a sense of validation. Anakin thought of the two people he cared about being wronged by the Republic, and even the Jedi being wronged by them too. So while Palpatine was hoping he could spend his time manipulating Anakin to the dark side, he really just focused Anakin's distrust and hatred towards the Republic, not the Jedi. Anakin did have his issues with the Order, but he saw that the Jedi were victims of a plot, same as Palpatine and same as Naboo. It was clear the Republic wasn't the proper entity to serve. He thought about joining Padme or Palpatine, but as a Padawan, he didn't want to leave his master. While Anakin was contemplating his place in the galaxy, the Jedi were left without a counter. They were distrustful of the Republic, but they couldn't abandon their place in this war. It was their duty to bring peace to the galaxy. As they considered their approach to ending the war, the CIS ramped up its attacks. Chancellor Deshi responded with even more hostility and used both clones and Republic troopers to demonize their enemies. The concept of war became one of total war, scorching planets, capturing and starving out populations, and war crimes scaled up under the new Republic Chancellor. The Jedi wanted to stop this, but they couldn't. They were stuck in a rut. The Order felt shifts from within because of it. The rupture had already begun, and for members of the High Council, they realized it might indeed be too late to resolve it. Inside the Raxus Senate building, Senator Amidala called for a ceasefire, or at least a halt to the war. Things were getting too dangerous for the common citizens of the galaxy. Truthfully, the people of the Senate wanted to agree with her. The notion of battle droids killing child soldiers was unnerving enough as it was. but the citizens were receiving the worst of the war and it needed to come to an end. She suggested that with the backing of the Neutral Systems Coalition, they could bring the Republic to a peace table and end the war. The people wanted to agree. The Separatists were much more focused on the populations of the galaxy, but they couldn't afford to at this point. Chancellor Dishi was unhinged, and he was pushing the Republic forces at the Separatists and doing anything he could for victory. His fear-mongering acquired millions of young troopers that were going to die for a pointless war. The people agreed, and Dooku tried to silence their concerns, but he wasn't able to. They wanted peace, and the Puppet Master wanted war, and Senator Amidala was able to rally her allies in the Senate to try and pull them from the war, but it wouldn't come. Due to Sidious playing the Puppet Master, he told Dooku exactly what he wanted. It was ironically the same thing he wanted before the war began, to have Senator Amidala executed. She was returning to Naboo, and she could be free game there, frame it as a Republic attack, and force the CIS further into the war. As Padme moved to return home, bounty hunter Jango Fett was moved to Interceptor, considering he never died in a battle of Geonosis that never happened. Jango moved in. When they arrived over Naboo, Slave 1 exited right behind Padme's Senator vessel and he opened fire. The pilots of the Naboo starship moved out of the way, doing everything they could to avoid Slave 1's fire. From the surface came dozens of N1 starfighters intent to protect the Senator. Padme was jolted around her cabin as the starship raised its rear shields, and R2 moved from one side of the ship to the other to make sure the shields didn't crack. The starship barely survived long enough for the N1s to cover it, as the pilots opened fire on the bounty hunter. Slave 1 moved about, dodging the blaster fire, while burning down a number of his enemies. It bought Padme enough time to escape and get to the surface of the planet. Without anything to take cover in outside the planet, Jango and the Naboo pilots were forced into an intense standoff, as Jango dropped a bomb to disintegrate a number of his opponents as he burned after the survivors. As the fight was continuing, 2 starfighters dropped out of hyperspace. One of the Jedi called over to the other and told them to drop their hyperspace rings. Anakin blasted forward, realizing that this was a bounty hunter going after Padme. Obi-Wan followed closely behind as they caught up to the bounty hunter and unloaded their torpedoes. Jango spun away as he dropped some flares, to force the missiles to explode. The N1s banded together with the Jedi, as they were able to disable one of the wings on the bounty hunting vessel. Anakin, filled with rage, sped forward and blasted open the cockpit, sucking Jango out. Thankfully, he was wearing his helmet, so he had a little bit of time to survive in space. However, Anakin had a different feeling about this, as he sped his starfighter forward and caught Jango on the hood. As he did, he pushed the throttle forward all the way down, speeding through the atmosphere and dropping a speed a couple hundred feet from the surface, sending Jango into the ground, killing him on impact. While Skywalker was sending Jango to his terrifying death, Kenobi attached a couple cables to Jango's ship and they dragged it back to the surface, so that it could be investigated. The following several hours would be stressful as the Naboo Royal Guard moved to protect Padme. Skywalker was accompanying them, as Obi-Wan went to investigate Slave 1. During Obi-Wan's search for more information, Anakin and Padme had time to interact with each other. They were able to speak about the political atmosphere in the galaxy. It allowed a more natural conversation to take place, which alleviated Anakin from his stress over the war, even giving Anakin a sort of incentive to leave the Jedi Order and the Republic behind. While Padme didn't have any attraction for Anakin, she was amazed and overjoyed with his growth since the last time she saw him. Despite the nature of Anakin and Padme's conversation being positive, it was the news that came from Obi-Wan that unnerved them the most. Padme's ally, Count Dooku, was directly tied to the events surrounding her almost assassination. It was clear that he was the individual who hired Jango to try and kill her, and if it weren't for the Jedi reinforcements, she wouldn't have survived or learned about the encounter. This left her in a weird predicament. While there was never a bombing at the landing platforms on Coruscant, Padme believed that this attempt on one of his own public officials was the perfect way to expose him. Up until this point, the two of them seemed to get along, and now it was clear that to win and end this war, she needed to use her newly found political leverage to reduce Dooku's role. Because Padme needed protection, Obi-Wan dispatched Anakin to watch after Padme and protect her until the time was right. The Council approved of this mission, because at the moment, they were trying to maintain order inside the temple and the galaxy. They needed to consider the implications that the Separatists were the better allies for them than the Republic, which had essentially cast them off. Anakin's undercover mission was meant to be the Jedi's way to show that they didn't want the war, but if Anakin was found, it would do the opposite for their order. Chancellor Dishi and the Republic would use it as a way to paint the Jedi as loyalists to the opposition. While the Jedi were struggling, Padme returned to Raxus trying to figure out how she could combat Dooku. Anakin was a little too hasty and suggested getting him back, but that wouldn't accomplish their goals. They needed to show that the CIS government was capable of upending their more radical members. To allow Dooku to sit on control was to do the same as a Republic. Plus, they had the hollow reader that Dooku gave Jango. It was a data fob with Sereno insignia, one carried by the royal family. Dooku had no issue using these because Jango was the most successful bounty hunter in the galaxy. He'd been killing Jedi left and right during the war, so he didn't have a single reason to doubt that Jango would fail. And had the Jedi not arrived when they did, he wouldn't have. Padme revealed the information to her closest allies within the Separatist government, allowing them to pass the information along quietly, while Anakin, no longer sporting his Padawan braid, remained hidden, stood by her side as a protector. The entire political process was jarring for him, but in his heart, he felt like this was the right decision. At the same time, it still felt like the CIS was too similar to the Republic, just with more attempts at killing their politicians, rather than unjustly removing them from power. Skywalker would watch the senators of the CIS gather together and come together to pass a vote of no confidence in their leader, which pushed Mina Bonteri to control over the Separatist movement. This was due to a number of reasons, but mostly because, unlike the Republic, she would push for peace. Dooku and Palpatine were even more frustrated with this, because while Palpatine was letting Dooku do his thing, he was trying to pull Anakin into darkness. Now he couldn't puppeteer his puppet, and their political influence on the galaxy fell out from under them. Due to the vote of no confidence on Dooku, the Separatist government took control over the droid armies and called for a ceasefire, one that the Neutral Systems Coalition backed, after finally getting the Separatist peace treaty terms on their desks. The Republic was war-hungry. They wanted to destroy the galaxy to achieve victory, but two whole forms of government were rejecting it. The threat of the CIS was if they didn't come to the talking table, Coruscant would fall by the end of the week. It was a genuine threat, and the Republic didn't appreciate it, but the CIS didn't want war, and Mina understood that the only way to get through to those monsters was a genuine threat. Ever since Palpatine lost his power in the Senate, the CIS had full usage of its reserve military, so an already massive droid army and navy were exponentially larger. This meant that in one swift strike, the CIS could wipe the Republic off the map. The threat was jarring enough to bring the Chancellor to the talking table in neutral territory. The thing is, the Confederacy just wanted its independence from the Republic. The war was unnecessary. The Republic came into the meeting with a plan, and they signed the peace treaty almost immediately. However, they intended to enact heavy tariffs on the Confederacy and, if need be, steal their transport ships, just as a way to show them what they were capable of. If they didn't want war, then they didn't have to have it. In the mind of Chancellor Deshi and his advisors, including Masumeda, it was the best decision. They could have their peace, and then they could make the insufferable Confederacy pay for it. Due to the entire situation resulting in peace and Anakin feeling separated from the Jedi Order, as many Jedi did, he decided that he would leave said order. Simply due to how confounding the political environment of the galaxy was, Padme wasn't looking for a relationship, but Anakin's friendship was exactly what she needed. He was still working as a guard of sorts, but it wasn't that black and white. They were able to naturally bond over this time. It mostly, again, came from the fact that Anakin was being more mature during such a strenuous situation. It made them tighter together. General Grievous, on the other hand, was unnerved by the end of the war, but because the CIS knew how impatient he was, they decided that when they officially set themselves up as a government, one that would have no problem competing with the Republic, they'd move into the Outer Rim. This was a promise to the good general, which completely quelled his ideas for a droid rebellion. Also, because Dooku was ousted from power, Grievous had absolutely no intention to interact with the two Sith. He believed that they were lesser beings, because they couldn't maintain control over a brand new form of government. His thoughts for Droid Rebellion died out with the promise of conquest and victory in the Outer Rim in the next 10 years. So with his free time, he used super tactical droids and commandos to learn more about these Sith and what they truly were and why they no longer had their power. All the while, the formation of a true Confederacy elicited attention from the Neutral Systems Coalition. With the war over, and completely ended by Mina, Padme, and Satine, it was time to move into the first post-war era since the formation of the Republic. It was a time where people would try and be better than they were. But everyone knew that as such fickle beings, it was impossible to resist the urge for war and conflict for forever. Satine and the Neutral Systems aligned themselves with the CIS. This was mostly due to the fact that they weren't chasing war. The current Chancellor of the Republic was in deep with the bureaucrats, and to sustain his power, he needed conflict. The alliance between the Confederacy and the Coalition was very surface level. They weren't trying to make the Republic look weak. but the Republic was trying to drag them into another war. The tariffs were bad enough as it was, and with Republic warships popping and stealing Allied transports, it became increasingly clear that the Republic wouldn't stop unless they put it to a stop. But how could they do that without a full-fledged war breaking out again? Satine didn't want war, and neither did the Separatists. The Republic itself was yet again afraid of war, because they took the threat of the Confederacy very literally. While the Republic looked for help and a way to maintain their power, its initial closest partner was having problems. The Jedi Order, after such a terrible war and situation, started to crack open. There was never an actual conflict with each other, but it was a crumbling of their structure. They couldn't maintain their order, and the Jedi split into 5 different sects, each version going off into different directions. So even if the Republic wanted allies in the form of the Jedi, they were a little preoccupied at the moment. The Sith were preparing to seize advantage over the situation. They knew that Chancellor Dishy would try and restart the war. Considering that they were aligned with the bureaucrats that controlled him, they'd force his hand to reignite his desire to win this conflict. Though something the 2 Sith were not prepared for was General Grievous. The droid general, thanks to knowledge from his commandos and super tactical droids, learned that the Sith were the ones responsible for his accident and his eventual manipulation. Grievous still hated the Jedi, and nothing would ever change that, but the Sith needed to pay. With war a decade away for him, he went to their Sith lair on Naboo. They were completely caught off guard by his arrival, but the droid general ignited his lightsabers and attacked the 2 Sith. Neither of them were going to die to this fool, and Sidious didn't have time for this, so he started choking Grievous. He took pleasure in the general's suffering, as he walked over to the droid general, who was hoisted up in the air. General Grievous knew he wouldn't win this engagement, and truthfully, after realizing what he had become, seeing how much pain he endured, he made sure 2 things were finalized. Mina promised to protect his people, and he wanted to return a favor to the Sith, which thanks to commando droids meant that he and the 2 Sith went out in Grievous's blaze of glory. An explosion rocked the Sith lair, killing all 3 of them in an instant. With both ancient religions of the Force completely disorganized or destroyed, their influence on public events deteriorated. Now there were of course still issues for the Separatists. Their alliance with the Trade Federation and multiple other warring corporate bodies meant that they needed to maintain strong relationships with them. The best thing is though, they were very easily bought. Similar to the promise they made to Grievous, they would find a way to profit in the Outer Rim War. However, this play was a brilliant move made by the senators of the Confederacy. They understood that like the Republic, their government was built on corporations. That was thanks to Dooku. The CIS needed time to fully establish its legitimacy as a form of government, so that they could kick these corporate entities from political influence, without suffering from potential war with them. Luckily, the backbone of most of these corporate leaders were fragile. They stood tall because of Dooku's influence. Without him to unite them, they would slowly fade back into simple corporations, without a strong military presence. This was also done through deals made that had the CIS buying up Trade Federation and Techno-Union military technology and forces. It did cost them a lot, but of course, it was all in favor of the long-term plan. While Satine was well aware of this, she didn't have anything against the idea of waging war against the criminal syndicates of the Outer Rim. They deserved to be uprooted, and the plan that Mina and Padme crafted was exactly what the Outer Rim needed. Due to the separation of the Jedi Order, Kenobi was one of the many Jedi who created a sect within the Neutral Systems Coalition. An even smaller sect, led by Obi-Wan, started an outpost on Mandalore, where he would eventually leave behind the life of a Jedi to begin a relationship with Satine. Anakin and Obi-Wan stayed close in contact, but because Anakin wasn't present on Coruscant when the war came crashing down and when the Jedi split, he was able to avoid the stress of all of it. Skywalker stayed with Padme, and because their relationship wasn't just black and white, it slowly became a romantic bond. This came after the tension of the galaxy slowly dissipated. It was still very present, and that did come from the Republic, but as Chancellor Deshi tried to force the Republic back into war, he lost crucial allies in the core. Planets like Alderaan and Chandrilia, which were major staples in the core, joined the alliance between the Coalition and the Confederacy. The mere fact that there were choices for fleeing senators and systems made it much easier to leave. Satine's coalition offered things that Mina's Confederacy didn't, and of course, vice versa. Plus, it was clear that the foundation of the Republic was fragile, and it was collapsing in on itself. And with an insurmountable debt to the Kaminoans for a war started by the Jedi, in the public's opinion, it was impossible for them to get back to pre-war success. The corruption that benefited the Republic led to its downfall. And at its collapse, there was the domination of the Alliance, the form of government structured around the relationship between the Confederacy and the Coalition. With the CIS using its vast military, they would eventually dive into the Outer Rim. The 10-year plan was a true success. While Anakin did eventually learn about the death of his mother, he never did join the war effort in the Outer Rim. Instead, he and Padme publicly got married, just like another former Jedi on Mandalore. They were no longer bound to their code, one that now had 5+ different interpretations. The Jedi sects would never come into conflicts with each other, and the clone armies of the war, long gone, would be free to live normal lives, thanks to protections put in place by the Alliance, to give the clones a semi-seamless transition out of military life. It may have not been their military or their people, but the Alliance was going to protect the citizens of the galaxy. At the end of those 10 years, the Outer Rim would be shredded by war, but a war that would redefine its future. The Alliance overshadowed the shell of the Republic, which was nothing more than rage-filled politicians with no credits dying out on an economically dry Coruscant. Because of the desire to make the Alliance a government for everyone, one that felt more neutral, they moved their capital to Hosnian Prime. It was just because there was some bad blood with the Confederacy, and it gave them a new, neutral space, especially for former Republic planets that wanted to feel welcome. Plus, the Senate on Raxus was much too small for the Outer Rim planets brought into the Alliance at the end of the war. Shortly following the establishment of the Alliance government on Hosnian Prime, Padme was stepped down from her role as a public servant, having dedicated so much of her life to restoring the galaxy. In her early 30s, she and Anakin would have a happy life, the one they desired, and slowly begin their family. Their friendships with others allowed their life to feel as normal as possible. With the Sith and the Jedi disorganized, or destroyed, the people of the galaxy only had to worry about any potential rises of corruption. For now, though, it was the beginning of an era of prosperity for the entire galaxy. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Alexandra Reese, The Beginning and End, Django Fat Clone, Nick5098, INTJ Recluse, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galavic Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granity Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewa670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tam, Johnny DeGuin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Galaxy 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Photos Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, Man 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. Before supporting the channel, smash that like button. Let's talk about this story. So, very political story, but it was a lot of fun doing this. I think this kind of allowed for a much different result to come from the war. I really wanted to focus on the political and situational side of things without the intervention of the Force or the Jedi or the Sith, and I think I accomplished that here. Obviously, you have to talk about the Sith because they're very intertwined with this, but I wanted their plans to kind of fall out from under them. I do believe that if Naboo, especially because Padme is a senator, I think Naboo joining, especially with Padme being their senator, the Separatists, it would make Palpatine look really weak. And I wanted it to kind of just be a butterfly effect from there, like most of these are, but more so the political butterfly effect. I think the CIS itself could have had more influence had Dooku not been in power, and I think had Dooku remained in power as the puppet, I think they wouldn't have won this war, and I don't think it would have gone the way it did in this scenario. I think what Palpatine was trying to go for in this scenario was trying to win the war flat out and then make Dooku the Emperor, and then have Dooku kind of work for him, essentially. But I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.